Hi, this is Alan Gassman. Welcome to Thursday, February 20, 2020, by popular demand, part 3 of our success tips for first-year lawyers. And yes, most of the attendees and the people we've been getting emails about are not first-year lawyers. First-year lawyers are too busy to learn success tips. They'll just learn the hard way. In any event, one success tip is to promote what you're doing so that people will pay attention. For example, Thursday, February 27th, we'll be talking about the biggest mistakes physicians make as owners and non-owners in medical practices. And why do you see the gear shift of my car and my Olympus dictaphone? The reason is I'm going to show you some unique things about what I do and how I do them, not for the purpose of having you copycat me, but for the purpose of having you think about how you can be most efficient and most effective. So if you haven't guessed, I drive myself home every night, unguided, and on the way home, I dictate the most important things from the day that I have not been able to dictate before. Whenever I have a telephone call or a meeting with a client, within 10 to 20 minutes after the call or the meeting, I sit down with a paralegal and I dictate my notes from the meeting so I don't forget anything. I have the paralegal take my notes and scan them into the computer so that they're not lost. And then I make note of letters that I can write to the clients in my 15 to 18 minute trip home. So on the way home, I am preparing by dictation the most important letter. And of course, that's going to be a letter to a client that is going to warn them about some issues and is going to reiterate what we discussed. And in particular, it will reiterate what I am doing, why I am doing it, and what their instructions to me were. Because 3 to 5 years later, it will be very important when that client says, "Hey, Alan, I never asked for this," or "Hey, Alan, how come you didn't do this?" "Well, Harry, I sent you a letter the day after we met, and I said I was going to do these 7 things. There's nothing in here about helping your aunt in Antarctica. I'm not sure that we ever discussed it, but if we had, wouldn't you have brought it up when you reviewed the letter?" Okay, so I've dictated this letter on my way home. What happens? Well, one of our 2 evening transcriptionists will get to this letter, and when I get into the office the next morning, and I get in by around 5:45 a.m., on this printer will be the letter that the remote transcriptionist prepared, along with all the other client matters. There's usually 6 to 7 different stacked documents on this printer that one of our overnight secretaries will have done. And I pick if I'm in a hurry, I can sit down and edit that letter on my own, or I can fit it into my exercise program. So what you have in front of you there is the executive treadmill. If you look at the bottom, you've got the executive treadmill. I'm sorry some papers flew around this morning. It's a long story. But I get on this treadmill by 6 a.m., and I set it to go 4 miles an hour, which gives me a pulse rate of about 110 beats per minute. And on the treadmill desk, and you can see the large desk there, I have the work that I'm going to do for the day. And on the floor to the right are all the file folders I don't need anymore because I threw them on the floor during my workout. And on my right are sorting bins where there's a sorting bin for everyone in my office. So something that I look at on the treadmill that I want to give to Ken, I will put in Ken's sorting bin. And in the morning, Ken and I will discuss it, along with anything that Ken would like to discuss with me. I have one delegation meeting every morning with about 9 different people. I give them what I want them to help me with. They give me what they need help with. And we basically don't interrupt each other the rest of the day. I don't buzz Ken and say, "Hey, Ken, I got a question. I got to ask you about this." I know Ken's busy for the day. I batch my interruptions, and I batch how I interrupt others. On this platform where I work for 2 hours every morning, or an hour and 45 minutes every morning, is a laptop computer. What I dictate while I'm on the treadmill can be transmitted by the laptop to one of our remote or local secretaries. So that works well. It is hard to interrupt me when I'm walking 4 miles an hour, which is almost a jog. So I do get a lot of uninterrupted time. I've got a time clock there, so I always know what time it is. I've got a mirror there, so I can see who's up there behind me. And I have walked thousands of miles on this treadmill. And I find that my concentration in reviewing documents, dictating letters, making changes to documents is just as good, if not better, on the treadmill than it is when I'm sitting not exercising. So again, a lot of things fell down this morning before the pictures were taken, but you see the bins that I have, sorting bins. Usually that table is full of sorting bins, and in the morning everybody comes and gets their bin. It's sort of like their inbox from Alan, and then, as I said, we will meet. Now, in my office, I have 3 computers. Why? Because I'm too inept to have one computer, and one may break. So here's what I do. On the left-hand side, you see the phone. It's an ancient phone, but it still works great. To the left of that phone is my prioritized daily task list on a clipboard. Yes, it's old-fashioned, but it works. I've written down everything I want to get done during the day on that clipboard, and that clipboard also has my time slips. So I can sit down at my computer. If I'm talking to you on the phone, then I'm going, and you hear typing, that's me making notes on the left-hand computer. My notes are there with emails there. My primary computer, I may be looking at Google, Word, Excel, emails while I'm talking to you, while I'm also taking notes. And then on the right, I have my third computer, which is also accessible from home. So when I go home, I have access to the third computer, and of course, all 3 computers have my emails. And there's one of my printers on the right. I have 2 printers, one for when the other doesn't work. And then there's my scanner. If I want to scan a short document to you and send it to you or a secretary, I can do that, or I can ask my assistant to do that. And yes, that's Tom Petty of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and me holding an alligator. Now, another thing I have in my office that I wish I had thought of earlier is a separate workstation for someone to sit at facing me with a computer where they can take notes for me in a meeting, and at the same time they can see what's on my computer. So they can take notes, they can look at my emails, they can see what's on my computer, so that I can be more freewheeling with the client and less concerned with writing down every mundane email. In addition, you see here my back. I'm sitting at the desk. Brandon Ketron is taking notes for a client. He never types his notes. He always handwrites them. And then I have the most important person in my world, besides my wife and family, and that is my personal assistant. And my personal assistant sits basically in the same room that I'm in, so that I can interrupt him or her anytime I want to get help. I may be talking to you on the phone and put it on mute and go, "What is Charlie's wife's name? I forgot the name of Charlie's wife, and I forgot to get his file. Can you get me his file?" And then we're able to work very, very effectively together. And over the years, I've had a number of assistants, and people always say, "That's the best assistant I've ever seen. She gets right back with me. She's polite. She's positive. She solves problems. She answers her phone. How did you make her so good?" And the real answer is, number one, we hire really talented people. But number two, we let that be their whole job. Her job is not to go get me a cup of coffee. Her job is not to type documents for clients. Her job is to be a killer good personal assistant. So think about that. Now, when I do my dictation in the morning, I dictate anywhere from 7 to 12, usually client matters that I want a paralegal to work on. These are prioritized A, B, C, D, and placed in these bins. So a secretary does not get her assignment directly from me. She will go to the A bin, see what the next assignment is, and take that. That way you don't give one secretary 4 items, another gets 3, and the one who got 3 got interrupted and you never got any of them. So we find that the bin system and the rotating helps. And what doesn't get done by the end of the day gets shipped out by PDF and electronic dictation to our nighttime people. They have access to our computer people. They are trained paralegals. One happens to like to work from 11 until 7, and one happens to like to work from about 6 until 11. So they coordinate their efforts, and that works very well. Again, I cannot emphasize how important it is to once a day sit down and make a list of everything you want to get done for the next day or for that day. And then when I get an interruption and somebody says, hey, I need XYZ, that's fine. I'm going to write it down so I don't forget it. But I am not going to let it interrupt my process today unless it is very, very special. Now, I will also mention to you that this phone on my desk does not ring, and it has not rung for over 15 years. The phone on my assistant's desk rings. She has her own phone and a clone of my phone. I can't even answer my phone because I don't want the temptation. She has to answer it and ask the person if they want to talk to me. Who are they? Do I want to talk to them? Put them on hold, and I pick that up. By the way, as a lot of you know, I don't dial my own phone calls. I really don't want to bill a client for 3 minutes of being on her voicemail, leaving her a message, trying to figure out where her assistant is. So my assistant simply calls and says, this is Ann from Alan Gassman's office. Mr. Gassman is calling Dr. Schmidt. Is he available? Now, about 1 out of 15 people either are irritated with that or joke about it, that I'm too high and important to dial a phone number. Actually, I'm too impatient to dial a phone number. Some of the phone numbers I dial, but a lot of them I don't. When I have a phone call appointment, it is booked in advance. There is a reminder, and if there are 2 or more people, I strongly prefer to use a Verizon line. Verizon does not charge a lot for this, but it is secure. When you call into a Verizon call, it requires you to not only give your code, but also to give your name. This is Alan Gassman for the 8 o'clock call. Then when it checks you in, everybody else hears this is Alan Gassman for the 8 o'clock call. And if I accidentally hang up or get disconnected, it says, this is Alan Gassman from the 8 o'clock call leaving. So you know who's in that room, you know who's not in that room, and I find that that's important. We have our email remind the client that we have a call coming up in 15 minutes and in 5 minutes so that people are less likely to be late or to forget about the call. For meetings, we have the client reminded the day before, and when the client gets to the conference room, they are asked if they would like coffee or a drink. There's a nice refrigerator there that they can get anything they want out of. But importantly, the secretary says, have you brought anything that you would like to have copied to share with Mr. Gassman? Because otherwise, it just takes a little bit extra time. Or is there anything I can tell him before he comes in? Well, yes, you misspelled my daughter's name in 6 different places. Would you fix it, please? It's much easier to know that before I go into the meeting than after I get into the meeting. Before I walk into the client meeting, I tell my secretary or my assistant when to give me a 15-minute warning and when to give me a 5-minute warning. If it's a 1-hour meeting, then 45 minutes into the meeting, she will walk in. It's really tacky. It's a sign that says, you have 15 minutes. She shows that to me and the client. I wave her off. The client chuckles sometimes, other times thinks I'm a nut job. But in any event, we start winding it up. Then she comes in with another 5-minute warning. And then she comes in at the end and says, or she may come in at the end if there's another scheduled appointment saying, Mrs. Jones is getting ready to speak with you on the phone. Mr. Gassman, are you ready? That's just very helpful for me. Before I leave the meeting room where I met with the client, one of our assistants is assigned to the task of making sure that everything that I received and everything I wrote on gets scanned before we have a chance to lose it. It goes to the vault area if there's something important that needs to be kept. And as I said, within 10 to 15 minutes, I sit down, preferably with the legal assistant or lawyer who's going to be helping me. I turn on a dictaphone and I do an extensive memory dump of everything I can remember from the meeting. I go through all my notes, and sometimes in the left margin of my notes, I'll write down things relating to other clients or other projects that come to mind during a meeting. And my secretary's note to remind me to say, what's in the margin there? Oh, it's your wife's birthday again. Are you going to forget that again? No, better not. So as you can see, I have a day full of habits. I pretty much wake up every morning at 5 a.m. I'm pretty much in the office every morning by 5:45 a.m. I'm dictating on the way to the office. When I get to the office, I plug the dictaphone into that computer you saw. My remote worker, who is working at least through 7 a.m., can handle it, so I get it back right away. I'm marking up what I did the day before, and I'm getting it all done. Debbie gets into the office at 7:15. We go over everything I need right away. I'm still walking 4 miles an hour. And then the lawyers start with me at 7:45. So that works really well. The day goes very, very quickly. There's more things I can show you if we do another part. Let's talk about another couple things. The listen carefully rule. Please, please, please try to do as little talking as possible and let the client say everything that they want to say. Let them be heard. Nothing is more frustrating than not being able to share your issues with a professional who you are paying. Now, that's easier for me to say than many of you because I'm always paid, almost always on an hourly basis. If you get bored, you can pretend that the client is handing you a $20 bill every 5 minutes or whatever your hourly rate is to make that feel a little bit better. You can pinch your hands under the table if that's what it comes to. But try to take copious notes. Try to let the client know that you're taking good notes and help them finish their stories to show that you are listening to their stories. Now, as you can tell from what I do in some of my rituals, I didn't give you all of them, but I gave you some of them. Think through page 14 of what you and your office do, both from the standpoint of what the client sees and from the standpoint of what's going on backstage, so that you can make every experience for the client as good as an experience as you possibly can. So, for example, we have an intake team. If somebody calls and would like to become a client of our office, I will very rarely speak to them until we already have an appointment set up, a retainer check, and a signed fee agreement. And when the intake people explain to the client, the prospective client, that our normal intake process is to get a retainer and a check and a meeting on the calendar, a lot of clients say, wow, that seems really forward. Could I talk with him first and make sure that this is a good fit? Can I have a free consultation? And what we tell them is that we are not very good at deciding what clients we should accept and what clients we shouldn't accept but we're looking for the very best clients we can have to provide them with the best services. And in our experience, individuals and companies who don't mind signing a fee agreement and giving a retainer and booking an appointment are our best clients. And clients who insist on a free consultation and don't want to pay until later and don't want to sign a fee agreement, quite candidly, usually don't turn out to be really good clients. I will, upon request, do a 10-minute call. I will not, upon request, do a free consult. Now, in my early years, I did a lot of free consults. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but just think about this. But what I've also said that it's important is when that client walks in the door, my receptionist knows their name, stands up, greets them, offers them water, Coke, coffee, walks them to the conference room, asks them if there's anything we can copy, asks them if they'd like to have a newspaper. I always walk into that conference room within 2 to 6 minutes of when the appointment time was. They're not going to wait for me. I don't like waiting for people. They're not going to wait for me. Big smile, nice handshake, glad to see them. How can I help them? Take copious notes, care about them, and get them a letter describing what we're doing that day or the next day to make a great impression. That is really important. A few other tips in the 8 minutes that we have here. Think about your core professional practice and what else you can be doing for clients, and learn a second or third specialty. If you think you want to be an estate planner and only an estate planner, guess what? You're going to have some slow months and some slow weeks. If you don't mind being part-time, that's okay. But if you want to be full-time, you're going to have some other subspecialties like drafting shareholder agreements, setting up corporate minute books, handling real estate situations, counseling business owners, some second specialty. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And quite honestly, if I only did estate planning all day, it would get kind of boring. I like doing some business work. I like doing tax issues. I like helping people negotiate situations. I like helping to supervise. I won't say supervise. I like interacting with lawyers who help my clients get divorced, bankrupted, stay out of jail, medical due diligence, whatever the client needs. I want to have some reasonable involvement. I find that usually gives a better result for both the client and the specialist lawyer, and it keeps me as being the primary lawyer for that client. So the next time they have a problem, I hope they'll call me because I care about them, and I won't hesitate to refer them to the very best lawyer, CPA, or other professional for their situation. When I make referrals, it is not for the purpose of getting referrals back. When I first started practicing law, I was really amazed. A trust officer sat down with me and said, last year, your law firm referred us 11 clients, and we referred you 16 clients. We can pretty much refer you 1.5 clients for every client you refer us, but if you don't refer anything to us, we're not going to refer anything to you. And the question going through my mind was, wouldn't I be referring my clients to the very best as opposed to referring my clients to somebody who refers back to me? And I've always since then referred not with regard to what's in it for me, but with regard to what's in it for the client. And I would rather advertise and give tacky webinars and find clients on my own than having to get clients from people who won't refer to me unless I refer to them, or aggressive, expensive professionals who are going to charge my clients more than they need to be charged so that I can be helped personally. I was at a conference last week, and one of the older lawyers came up to me and said, I see you guys are doing well. In my career, I never had to advertise. It was kind of like a little bit of a criticism because our law firm, obviously does a little bit of marketing. That's what this webinar is about, right? What I didn't say back to him was, yes, and I don't have 1/3 of my clients who were referred by other professionals that I would never want to work with. So do what's best for clients. Sorry if I'm off on a tangent. Page 26. Please be able to explain what you want to do for the client in 3 minutes. Practice on your spouse, your dog, your grandmother, whatever it takes. If you cannot explain what you need to do for the client in 3 minutes, and then open it up for questions. Some clients won't have any questions. You better write them a letter to make sure they listened. Some clients will have a lot of lessons, but please don't turn them into being comatose before they know what you're going to do for them. For example, asset protection. I can describe asset protection easily in 2 or 3 minutes using this chart, and I constantly do use the chart. Page 98. By the way, these are materials that I'm going to be reviewing. Oh, page 98, if we could, Matt. These are materials I'm going to be reviewing in Gainesville Saturday with some LLM and tax students. Please remember the 80-20 rule. 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your clients. 80% of your revenue will come from 20% of your projects. 80% of your revenue will come from 20% of the things you normally do. 80% of your best clients are going to come from 20% of your referral sources. 80% of your worst clients is going to come from 20% of your referral sources. 80% of the mistakes made in your office are going to be made by 20% of the employees. If you can find where your leverage points are, that advisor who is sending, those 3 or 4 advisors who are sending me 80% of my good referrals, I want to get to know them better. I want to know what I can do to help them more. Those 80% of the mistakes coming from 20% of the employees, I can sit down with those employees and either say goodbye or find a way for them to make fewer mistakes. So you want to really use that Paredes principle for all it's worth. The final thing I want to mention that we have used quite a bit is at page 125. This is the Omnia Profile Compatibility Rating Write-Up from a company called Omnia Profiles in Tampa. Omnia Profiles I've been using for about 30 years now. Your employee or you or your possible employee fills out a fairly innocuous multiple choice test, and Omnia Profile is able to tell you whether they are aggressive or followers, whether they are detail conscious or big picture conscious, whether they are friendly and outgoing versus analytical, whether they are a perfectionist or the opposite of a perfectionist, how many hours in a day they can typically work without getting tired, and how they will work with other people in the office. It is completely uncanny how accurate these people are. These tests, I think, are $150 to $200 each. We don't even hire a part-time high school student unless we run the Omnia. Anytime they say something will go wrong, it goes wrong. It may take 60 days, it may take 90 days, but it will go wrong. They will also tell you whether the employee is more interested in stability versus income opportunities, and they'll tell you how emotional the person is. They're not, I will say this, they are not always right, because a few of the people, or a lot of the people they think will be great, turn out not to be great, but they are never wrong in spotting something that may go wrong. We've hired against their advice probably 20 times in my career and got stung 19 out of 20. That was enough for me to learn. So that's Omnia Profiles. Run one on yourself to learn more about how you click. So you have one Omnia here for somebody who was not a good fit, and then page 126, you see somebody who was a great fit and is still with us. Another personality profile test that I think every American should take is the Colby Test. This shows you that my wife, Marcia, is primarily a fact finder. Her biggest mode of operation, no matter what you do with Marcia, she wants to know more about it. And then she follows through pretty quickly. She's got a pretty high follow-through line. So that's a really good legal assistant. That's a really good lawyer who's looking at detail. They're not going to let any facts go unknown. They're going to follow through and get stuff done. On the other hand, if you have somebody who's a low fact finder and a low follow through, forget it. They're not going to do well. Maybe they'll do well as a trial lawyer or they'll do well in sales. They will not do well pushing paper for a law firm. When we bring an employee in, we typically will give them a complete fake work day the first day. We give them things that are well suited for them to learn our systems and to see if they can get work done. We don't give them anything too difficult. We want to make sure they can work the day through, and then we look and see what they did to decide whether they're a keeper. We will not hire somebody who already has a job to come to our firm unless they have worked a couple of evenings or a Saturday, because a lot of people who come from other places to work for us don't make it because we expect a lot from them and we have high skills standards. So some people are not willing to work an evening or a Saturday to get a job. Those are not people that we want to work in our office. So give thought to this. Your team is much more important than your client base, because you can't have your client base unless you have your team. Finally, my friend and mentor, Marty Schweitzer, who's no longer with us, said, walk around the office, say hello to everybody, ask them what they're doing. You'll be completely amazed. They're doing things that don't need to be done. They're doing things the long way because they don't know the easy way. So think about that. We favor having a time clock. It's just not fair to us if people don't clock in. We ask that if they take a cell phone call, they walk towards the time clock on the call. If they're still on the call when they get to the time clock, clock out. Have the phone call upstairs or in their car or in the break room. As soon as they're done with the call, clock back in. It's bad for morale to have long personal calls. And then I'll finally end up with the merit badge system. There's a lot of different things to learn when you work in a law office. You can't know all of them, but you can let the employees know what they know and don't know and encourage them to learn more by giving them a list of what those skill sets are and how to learn them. And then when you teach them, you can videotape the teaching session so the next employee doesn't have to do it one-on-one, and they have a library to go back to. Finally, don't let negative people work in your office. Get rid of them, and that includes negative clients. There's ways to handle that. There's a great book called the No Complaining Book. I'll be glad to send you a free copy. All you have to do is ask, put in the RIE line, no complaining. Speaking of complaining, I apologize that I went 5 minutes over. There'll be no charge for that. If you want me to do a part next, I'll be glad to. If people ask for part 4, I'll be glad to do part 4. Otherwise, have a fantastic day, and may the rest of it be billable. Thank you. All right. How many people did I have? 11?